So we were learning about holding tefillin or holding a Sefer Torah and davening. And we had a brisa that said a person should not do that. You shouldn't daven while holding tefillin. And Shmuel added to that about not holding a knife, money, a plate, and a loaf of bread. Of course, the plate we're talking about that it has something on it, and the loaf of bread. So all of these are issues that you're going to be concerned that you're concerned that something's going to drop while you're davening, and you're going to not be able to. It's not going to be usable afterwards, and therefore you're not going to be able to concentrate properly. And we also learned yesterday that in Shulchan Aruch it mainly mentions these items, and it says other items. In general, there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar not to hold anything while you're davening. The only thing that a person could hold is a siddur and a mitzvah like lulav and esrog, a lulav and so on. Now, the Gemara also mentioned that while holding tefillin, a person shouldn't go to sleep, not even a temporary sleep, not a nap. And also a person should not urinate while holding tefillin. So this is what the Gemara is really concerned about. The previous Gemara seems to be a contradiction to this Gemara. The previous Gemara brought three opinions. On side A of 23a, we had three opinions, Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva, about holding tefillin while defecating. If a person has nowhere to put their tefillin, Beis Shammai said, don't bring it into the bathroom, leave it in one of the walls, even though there's, ganovim, there's mice, whatever the issues are, leave it outside in the window or in the wall of the outside. Then came Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva. Beis Hillel said, bring it into the bathroom while holding it. And Rabbi Akiva said, hold it inside, bring it in the bathroom and hold it wrapped in your garment. So what we see is that according to Beis Hillel and according to Rabbi Akiva, a person would be allowed to defecate while holding tefillin. And again, we're dealing with a scenario where you have no other choice. There's you're really limited with where you could put it. And Beis Shammai and Rabbi Akiva seem to permit holding it. And here we have a brisa that says that when a person's urinating, he's not allowed to hold tefillin. So how do you reconcile this contradiction? So the Gemara says that Rava in the name of Rav Shesha says, you know what? Very easy. This brisa is obviously Beis Shammai. Because Beis Shammai was of the opinion you leave it in the window that's near the outside street, near the street, and don't bring them inside to the bathroom. So Beis Shammai holds that that's the appropriate way to deal with this situation. Basically, the point is we're dealing with two issues. On the one hand, you don't want to bring tefillin into the bathroom. On the other hand, you don't want to leave them in a dangerous place. So which one outweighs? Another dangerous place means they might get stolen. They might get desecrated by, people might steal them. They might be dishonored. So which way is better? Is it better for you to hold them, or is it better for them to be potentially stolen and put in hands of people who aren't going to maybe respect them? So the Gemara, so that was Beis Shammai's view, was leave them outside. Leave them outside. Here, Beis Shammai says, don't hold them when you're urinating. Or the Brisa says, don't hold them when you're urinating. So Rava says, the name of Sheshes, you know what? This fits with that opinion of Beis Shammai. The reason why it says don't hold them while urinating is because that's Beis Shammai's opinion. Beis Shammai said earlier, don't defecate with them. And here he says, don't urinate with them. That's all. So that's the understanding of the Brisa. That's the understanding of Rava in the name of Rav Sheshes. And so he concludes this is not the halacha. What would the halacha be according to Rava in the name of Rav Sheshes? Obviously, like Beis Hillel or Beis Shammai or Rabbi Akiva, like that either you wrap it in your garment and bring them inside, or you hold them in your hands and bring them inside. That's what the understanding of Rava and Rav Sheshes is. This brisa is not the final halacha. This is not the final verdict. And he explains himself. He says, if it would be Beis Hillel, if you could go into a permanent bathroom, defecate, that's permissible. So here you're just urinating in it's considered a temporary bathroom. So would this be a question? Of course, you could hold the tefillin while you are urinating. That's the Gemara's understanding at this point. And that's Rava and Rav Sheshes's statement. So the Gemara says there's a continuation of that brisa that it says, things that I permitted you here, I prohibited to you there. And so this is obviously talking about something regarding a bathroom. That there's something that I permitted in one place and I prohibited in another place. So the Gemara says this might be the explanation of that statement. That statement is a very vague statement. We don't know what that means. Something I permitted to you here, I prohibited to you there. However, if we want to say and give an explanation for what that statement is, here is an option. If we want to say that Beis Hillel is the author of this brisa, we'll have a very good answer. Beis Hillel says over there, you bring them into the permanent bathroom, you can defecate while holding tefillin. And when it comes to a temporary bathroom, meaning when it comes to a urinal, when it comes to urinating, you cannot hold the tefillin. Something I permitted to you there, I prohibited to you here. Here you have a good example. So if we explain it different than what Rav Sheshes said, different than Rava said in the name of Rav Sheshes, we want to explain it differently and say, no, Beis Hillel says both statements. He says over there it's permitted. He says over here it's prohibited. That would fit with what's stated afterwards, something that I permitted to you there, I prohibited to you, I prohibit here. That would make sense. It fits very well now. So maybe logically we don't understand the reason behind it, but the statement at least flows. At least there is what to explain what we're talking about. Now we know what we're talking about. There's something where I permitted, and there's something that I prohibited. According to Beis Shammai, everything is prohibited because you can't bring it in. You can't bring your tefillin into a bathroom, whether you're using it, whether you're defecating, or whether you're urinating. It doesn't matter. You can't bring the tefillin into the bathroom, according to Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel, if you want to explain the brisa, that this brisa fits with Beis Hillel, now we'll understand that there it's permitted, here it's prohibited. The only thing that we will be stuck on is what would the reason that it doesn't seem to make sense.
I'd like to give you a reason, if I can.
You want to give a reason? Okay, what's your reason?
The reason is when you defecate, you're sitting down. The tefillin can't fall too far; they'll fall on the side anyhow. When you're urinating, you're standing, they might fall in front of you or fall higher. So that might be one of the reasons.
So Ben has a thought of maybe what the logic would be.
Can I interrupt,
Which
Rabbi?
is nice. So, which is an interesting thought. The Gemara gives something similar, but not exactly what you're saying, Ben. But
Rabbi,
it's okay. Yes, Susan.
I find it. I don't think it's right to bring tefillin into the bathroom.
Right. Well, we're not discussing what's right. We're discussing the better of the two evils.
Okay. All right.
There's both are a problem. Leaving them outside is not good, and bringing them in is not good. And so here we're talking about such a scenario. We're not talking about where you have a mansion and you have you have a million places to put your tefillin and you decide to bring them into that.
Nowadays, if you find you're in a situation where it's not going to be stolen, isn't it better to leave it outside of the bathroom? If you're in a shul,
obviously,
there's a place to put them, right?
Obviously.
Okay.
That's very obvious. So here we're dealing with you're in a tight situation. So the Gemara now says that this would be maybe the explanation of that statement. Something I permitted to you there, I prohibited to you here. So let's read it inside. We're going to start. Let me start on the third wide line. 23b. E amrit bishleima. It will be good if you say that Beis Hillel hitarti lecha kan, that Beis Hillel permits it over here, kavua, when it's a permanent bathroom, a person is entering in order to defecate. He permits holding the tefillin inside the bathroom, bringing it in. Asarti lecha kan, but nevertheless, I prohibit it for you. In another scenario where it's a Beis Hakisei Arai, where it's a temporary bathroom where you're urinating, that is prohibited. If that would be the verdict of Beis Hillel, if that's what Beis Hillel holds, that would be good because it would fit the statement of something that I permit to you in one place, I prohibit to you in another place. Ela'i amrit Beis Shammai. However, if you're going to tell me that this brisa is the opinion of Beis Shammai, haloi sharu v'loi midi, they never permit bringing it inside a bathroom. And because they never permit bringing it inside, therefore, there is the statement, something I permit to you here, I prohibit to you there, would not have any meaning in Beis Shammai's view. So how could you say that this is Beis Shammai? That's their question on Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis. That's the Gemara's question. That's what we got up to yesterday.
Rebbe?
Yes.
If only even to answer Ben, it's nice that he lives today and thinks about porcelain toilets where you sit. In the old days, if you go to Israel, you see it in a lot of places still. You had 2 foot pads and you squatted, you balanced.
It's the same thing. Squatting, you're still low.
You didn't sit anywhere. You basically just held on and squatted down. In which case, I would think it's a lot more dangerous to hold it.
I'm just not sure how you're connecting that point, that the practical.
He was talking about defecating from his perspective. It was easier because he was sitting, but if you're standing because you're urinating, that's harder. You might mess up the tefillin. I'm saying that in the old days, sitting to defecate was probably more of a balancing act than standing and urinating. That's all.
So you're asking a question. Then logically, it doesn't seem like it would. It doesn't seem like defecating should be permitted, and urinating should be prohibited.
Correct.
Okay.
Although with the urination, I think there's more of a chance of you getting on yourself. If you're wearing a robe type of clothing,
Right.
Or as they did before, with most of the clothing was almost like a talus, wraps and robes.
Right.
There I can see you getting it on yourself and you worrying that you're going to spray yourself.
Right.
While defecating, you have a direction, and a direction, whatever, so you might not get it dirty. That's all.
Right. Okay, good point. Thank you, Isaac, for giving us that, because it's very applicable to the next to this Gemara of understanding how things were in those days, and you'll soon see. So thank you. Yeah. Good point. So the Gemara here wants to say this explanation of those words, even though we don't understand the logic, why it should be this way, why should the law be this way, but at least we would understand how the statement of the Brisa would fit, would flow, because one place is permissible and one place is prohibited. So the Gemara says, well, really we could say that the meaning of that idea that there is something that's permissible and something else that's prohibited, we could say it's talking about another type of law, a different law in the same area, but a different law, not this. And then maybe we could answer Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis. What would that law be? That I permitted to you one thing, but I prohibited to you something else. So the Gemara says, Ki Tanya Hahi, when did we learn that statement? Regarding what case? Li'inyan tefach utfachayim. Regarding how much a person should expose themselves when they're using the bathroom. Meaning, according to Jewish law, we're not supposed to, we're supposed to be tznius. We're supposed to always be modest. So we don't expose ourselves more than where we need. And regarding the bathroom, so there is a halacha of how much a person can expose themselves. And again, keep in mind, like Isaac just explained to us, the way things were before they invented toilets, and in the way the clothing that people wore. So both points that Isaac said are very applicable here, that there is a concept of hand breath and two hand breaths, how much a person should expose themselves. And I saw it brought down in Shulchan Aruch and in the later commentaries that this law doesn't exactly apply nowadays because of the practicality of things. Of course, a person should only expose as much as necessary. And like for urinating, you don't need to expose, or a man doesn't need to expose themselves more than just their zipper. But in the olden days, they didn't have zippers. So just keep that in mind. They had robes. So if you keep that in mind, you understand why in the olden days they needed to, expose themselves more because of the practical side of the practicality of things. So it says regarding a tefach, a hand breath, and regarding two tefachs, regarding two hand breaths. What does that mean? The tani chada, we have one brisa that it learned, kishehu nifne, when a person defecates, megala liachar of tefach, he should open up, reveal behind from his back side, reveal one hand breath size. Ulafanav tfachayim, and in front of him, he reveals two hand breath sizes. Betanya idach, and we have another brisa that says liachar of tefach, behind him he exposes one hand breath, the length of one hand breath. Ulafanav leiklum, and in front of him he doesn't expose any area, so everything is covered in front of him, in his front. In his back, he reveals one hand breath. My lav edi be'edi be'ish. The first initial thought of the Gemara is, isn't this talking about both brises? Both of these statements are talking about a man, and there's a difference between if a man is defecating or is urinating. Like kasha, kan legedolim, kan leketanim. And it's not a contradiction. The difference is if a person is defecating, so therefore a man would need to expose himself from the back, a tefach size of a hand breath, and in front of him, just in case he urinates as well, he would need to expose himself 2 handbreadths in front of him. I'm sorry, the initial Gemara's, the initial thought is for urinating, he would need to expose himself 2 handbreadths in front of him, and for defecating, he would need to expose himself 1 tefach behind him. So the Gemara says that doesn't fit. The Tizbara, do you think that's the answer explanation of these 2 contradictory statements, brises? That doesn't really fit, because when you ibiktanim, if we're talking about urinating, why would he need? In other words, the statement, the brisa that says that you need to, that a person is allowed to expose 2 handbreadths in front of him, it also says 1 handbreadth behind him. Why would he need 1 handbreadth behind him? Why would he need that? He's only urinating. So the Gemara answers, no, it must be a different meaning to this statement. Both of these contradictory brises, they must both be talking about that a person is defecating. It's not a contradiction. One is talking about a man, one is talking about a woman, and because of the different anatomy and the different, therefore, for a man, he needs to expose in front of him 2 handbreadths, and for a woman, behind her, it is good enough 1 handbreadth. So that's the contradiction between these 2 brises are answered. You're dealing whether it's a man or a woman, and then on that, it's basically saying something that I permitted to you here, this that I permitted to you with a man, I prohibited to you with a woman. In other words, this that I permitted a man to open up 2 handbreadths, expose 2 handbreadths in their front clothing, that I prohibited to you for a woman to that she doesn't expose anything in her front. She just has to expose. She's just allowed to expose on the behind her. Okay, Ezra, do you have a question or?
Yeah, no. You translate Golim and Ketanim as defecation and urination.
Yeah.
From where does that? I mean, I can translate it as adults and children.
Right. You know what? I'm not sure why that is the translation, but since throughout Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, that's always been translated it to me, that it's always been translated that way. But you're right. Theoretically, the words, one means big and one means small. You know, theoretically, it could mean, you know, there are other translations of these words, but that's the common translation throughout Shas is Gedolim and Ketanim. So I guess it's called Lishna Ma'alya. I guess the reason is the Gemara is looking for a lashon that's respectable. In the Talmud, it doesn't want to use a disrespectful language, so it uses big and small, almost like we say number 1 and number 2. What do we use number 2 for? Defecating. So that's big, a big number. Small number we use for urinating. So I don't know, maybe it's along the same lines, but basically that's so I think it's considered a lishna ma'alya, just a proper term, respectable term. Okay, so the Gemara says that there is one problem with explaining the thing that let me mute everyone. There is a additional statement that doesn't fit with this. Again, we've now translated that something I permitted to you here, I prohibited to you there. We've figured out what that could mean. However, there is a different problem, and that is that on that, there's another statement that it says, let me read it inside. Ihachi, if so, if you want to translate it this way, it doesn't fit because This that we learned on this. Zehu kal v'chomer. This is a priori argument. She'ein olav tshuva, that does not have. This is a kal v'chomer that I don't have an answer for. That I can't explain it. I can't give an explanation for. So what would that mean? My anal of tshuva, what would that mean that there's no tshuva answer for? In other words, this is a argument that you could ask, how could, the meaning of this statement is this. A kal v'chomer would be, if this is the law, how much more so there, the same law should be the same, should for sure be this way. That's the kal v'chomer. Now, normally we answer a kal v'chomer and we say, no, there's a read that over there, we'll find some reason why it's more strict. And over there, there's a reason. So the Gemara is asking, if you want to tell me that there's a difference between a man and a woman and how much they're allowed to expose themselves when they use the bathroom, it's not surprising that there's a difference. Darka de milsa hachi isa. That's the way it is. It's not a kal v'chomer. Oh, if for a man you do this, for a woman for sure. For a woman you do this, for a man for sure. It's not a contract. There's no kal v'chomer. There's no such thing. Oh, it's a kal v'chomer, and now we don't. There's no way of refuting the kal v'chomer. This is the way it is. This is the practical and anatomy of a. This is the anatomy of a man and anatomy of a woman, and that's why the law is everything is very simple. There's what would that mean? Kal v'chomer she'ein of tshuva wouldn't apply. That statement of the brisa wouldn't apply. So elalav darka de milsa hachisa elalav. So now we're on the ninth line in the wide line, ninth wide line. Elalav, rather it must be talking about tefillin. Let's go back and say this whole thing is talking about tefillin, and we're talking about holding tefillin. And here we can say this is a kal v'chomer. What is the kal v'chomer? Let's go back to the original thought, and we're going to prove Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis wrong. That Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis wanted to say that the contradiction between the brisas, that one place it says you hold the tefillin while you use the bathroom, the other place says you don't hold the tefillin. We explain, Rava wants to explain it that no, it's Beis Shammai. That Beis Shammai says that in all cases you don't hold tefillin while you use the bathroom. That's Beis Shammai. That's the answer. That was Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis' explanation. You never hold tefillin. So the Gemara now says no. Let's go back and say that it's not Beis Shammai. It's Beis Hillel, and this will be the idea that one place. This will explain the statement that one place I permitted something. And here I prohibited something. When it comes to defecating, I permitted holding tefillin. When it comes to urinating, I prohibited tefillin. And now you'll have a kal v'chomer. You'll have this argument, this a priori argument, which is, if I permitted you to hold tefillin while you're defecating, how much more so I should permit you to hold tefillin when you're just urinating. That's a very logical kal v'chomer, very logical statement. And that would be a kal v'chomer she'ein olav tshuva. How could you say such a thing? I'm defecating and I'm permitted to hold tefillin, which would seem so disrespectful. And for urinating, I'm not allowed to hold the tefillin. So let me read it inside. Elalav tefillin. Rather, we're going to go back to the explanation that we're talking that this statement, I'm permitting you something here, I'm prohibiting you there. It's tefillin, holding tefillin in your hand. Utiyufta de Rava Amar Rav Sheshis utiyufta. And we're going to prove Rava in the name of Rav Sheshis wrong. We've just proven them wrong. You've concluded that their explanation that this brisa is Beis Shammai, it's not so. Tiyufta. They're disproven. Mikol makom kasha. Nevertheless, you have a kasha. Hashta beis hakisei kavua shari. if a permanent bathroom, what we mean is defecating, is permitted to hold tefillin, Beis Hakisei Arai, urinating, a temporary bathroom, which we're translating to mean as urinating, like Holstein, shouldn't that for sure be permissible to hold the tefillin while you're urinating? So the Gemara answers, Hachi Ka'amar. This is the reason, this is what it means to say, Beis Hakisei Kavua, a permanent bathroom, Deleka Nitzaitzis, that there's no dripping, there's no spritz, there's no drops because you're defecating. So that should be permissible. Beis Hakisei Kavua, it's permissible because you're sitting, you're crouching down, so there aren't going to be any drops that fall on your clothing. Beis Hakisei Arai, however, when it comes to urinating, standing up, that's the difference here. Crouching down or standing up. Beis Hakisei Arai, when it comes to standing up, so De'ika Nitzaitzis, that there's going to be drops that are going to fall on your clothing, that is usri, that is prohibited. So therefore, you wouldn't be allowed to hold tefillin because you're going to end up wiping off drops of urine from your clothing, and it wouldn't be respectful for the tefillin. And however, when you're defecating, because of the way you're positioned, it's not a problem. You're not going to end up getting any drop of urine on your clothing. So, so the Gemara says, so that would be the reason. Now, what's so bad about getting having a drop on your clothing that you need to wipe it and dry it? So it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, and it's based on other. And this is one of the Gemara. The explanation behind this is that it's based on a Gemara in Yuma that a person is not allowed to leave the bathroom with a drop of any sign that there might be a drop of urine on their clothing. And the reason is because people might start questioning the legitimacy of their children. Why is that? Because normally a healthy person urinates, there's an arch that the stream of the urine arches away from their body. However, there's something called a krus shafcha, a person's organs that the urine goes through. If there's an issue, which are also the reproductive organs, if there's an issue that something is severed, it would cause the urine to drip out and not flow with an arch. And because of that, it would mean that they really can't have kids. And so if someone sees urine on a person's clothing, it would look like that maybe, on a man's clothing at least, it looks like that maybe they really can't have kids. And then people are going to question maybe their kids are really not really theirs, and the wife might have had relations with someone else. Kids might be bastards. And therefore, because of that, it's a mitzvah for a person to make sure if they ever get any drop of urine on their clothing, they have to wipe it off. So this way,
it's called an enlarged prostrate, Rabbi. An enlarged prostrate.
A
prostrate. It's a large prostrate. It just blocks up the urinal tract.
Blocks the urine, causes it to drip out.
It doesn't affect the other side of it,
right.
Semen.
Prostate.
Right. So
common thing.
Right. But I don't know that in an enlarged prostate, right, that doesnn't affect having children.
That's also good for us altakakas. It's a difference between young men who are walking around, which are basically talking about people who are coming and going to the Beis Medrash, not talking about Sekanim worried about their children, but a young man should not walk around with urine on his clothing. That's all.
Right. So the point is that we're concerned that people might say something, and that a rumor might go out, and therefore a person, would be as a mitzvah for them to wipe off their clothing. Now nowadays, you have whatever. Now maybe it's not so. It doesn't happen so much because you urinate straight into the urinal. But theoretically, it could happen, with if it spritzes back, depending on it could happen that the urine comes back on one's clothing, and therefore a person should make sure to dry it off. So that is the explanation of why it would be prohibited to wear tefillin to hold tefillin when you're urinating, but it would be permissible to hold tefillin when one's defecating. So the Gemara says, so that's logical. That makes sense. So why does it say Ein Olav Tshuva? You have no answer for the Kal V'chomer. There is a good answer. It's explained very well.
Rabbi.
Yeah. Yes.
The Steinsaltz Gemara translates it a little bit differently. Where he says Diika Nitzutos.
Yeah.
So he says there are drops which are like ricocheting, which he may touch with his hand, and it's prohibited. It's not that it's getting on his clothing, but he's going to end up touching it with his hand because the drops are ricocheting.
He'll touch the drops not because he's wiping his pants.
Right. Yeah. It's like the whole thing says, it follows that when defecating in a regular bathroom where one sits, there are no drops of urine on one's clothes or shoes. He need not dirty his hands to clean his garment. Therefore, it's permitted to hold the tefillin in his hand. However, in a makeshift bathroom where one stands, there are ricocheting drops which may touch his hand, and it's prohibited. Like in other words,
so
that last piece.
The spritz might get on his hands. He's not wiping his pants, but the spritz might get on his hands.
Right. It's to get on his hand, not necessarily on his clothing.
On his clothing. But
it's not mentioning clothing. It's mentioning the drops are coming onto his hand, and that's why it's prohibited.
Right. The truth is, Rashi says that the drops might spritz onto his legs, and the Gemara in Yuma says it's a mitzvah to rub it off, to wipe it off, because it's prohibited to go out with spritz that's on one's legs. Maybe people will think that he is this krus shafla that can't have children, and he has a reproductive issue, and therefore the urine spritzes, goes down, it drips down, and it gets on his clothing. So it's a mitzvah to wipe it. So I don't think that the Steinsaltz is following Rashi's explanation. That, in other words, it's getting on his hands not because it's spraying on his hands, but because he's wiping his legs, either his clothing or his legs, with his hands. That's what it seems like from Rashi. So thanks for bringing that up. But I'm not sure if that's maybe a different explanation. In any event, the Gemara continues, and it says, "Ihachi." If so, we're on the first word on the line. Ihachi, my ein olav tshuva. Why do you say that there's no answer for this? Tshuva ma'al yasahi. This is a very good explanation of why holding tefillin in one case is prohibited. One place it's permissible. Makes a lot of sense. So the Gemara answers, Hachi ka'amar. This is what I mean to say. Ha milsya, this thing, teisi la b'teres taima, v'loi teisi la b'kal v'chaymer. This thing, understand it with logic, but don't learn it based on a kal v'chaymer, an a priori argument. The asya la b'teres kal v'chaymer. If you're going to use a kal v'chaymer, zehu kal v'chaymer she'ein olav tshuva, this would be a kal v'chaymer that doesn't have an answer. What does that mean? So what that means is this. Normally, an a priori argument is an argument where one thing is more lenient, another thing is more strict. And we use the argument to say that if this lenient case is prohibited, how much more so a strict case should be prohibited, or the opposite way. If the prohibited case, the more strict case, is permitted in one place, so how much more so the lenient thing should be permitted in some case. That's an a priori argument. How do you refute such an argument? So normally you refute such an argument by saying, well, you're claiming this is more strict and that's more lenient. That's not true. In a certain sense, this is more strict. This case has an area that's more strict, and therefore you can't use an a priori argument, or you can't say that that case is more lenient because really the other case is more lenient. So you could disprove such an argument to Kal V'chomer by saying that what you're claiming is more strict is not exactly more strict in law. And what you're saying is more lenient is not true. It's not always that way. There's another area where the other is more lenient, and this is more. So that's the normal way of disproving a Kal V'chomer. Here it says, don't disprove it, or don't learn it from a Kal V'chomer, just use logic. Because if you learn it from a Kal V'chomer, you won't be able to disprove it with the method of a Kal V'chomer disprove. What does that mean? That you could disprove it because of the practical side of the fact that there are drops of urine. That's how you explain this. But don't disprove the Kal V'chomer based on a laws, the logical way of disproving a Kal V'chomer. So again, all we did really was explain how the brisas and the statements of the brisas all fit. And what we've concluded from here is that holding tefillin in one's hand is not appropriate when urinating, but it's okay if in case of necessity when one is defecating. And that's the conclusion of this Gemara. Now we're going to start the next piece of Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis, and we are maybe about 20 lines from the bottom of the page. Maybe
Rabbi,
19 lines. Yes.
a quick question. I think it's brought down in halacha that there's a difference between the shel yad and shel rosh, but in the Gemara here, they're not making any differentiation between one and the other. I heard that according to halacha, if a person's going strictly according to halacha, one is allowed and one is not allowed. Like even to wear, one is allowed and one is not allowed, but they don't make that differentiation here.
Right. We saw one situation, or we did see one point that the Gemara brought two stories because we were afraid you might differentiate. So we in the Gemara, you remember on the top of the page, it brought a second story. And the question was, why did it bring a second story? Because the first story was a rabbi who had an issue with his shel rosh. He had an issue putting tefillin on his head, so he only wore the shel yad. So you wouldn't know the law, but therefore it brings the second story to show you that it's both the shel yad and the shel rosh. Both laws, both situations would be holding both would be okay. Yeah, I guess I'd have to look in Shulchan Aruch and see what the final. If there is a difference with regard to using the bathroom and holding tefillin. Again, these halachas are not so practical nowadays, so it's not like people know them off. It's not like a common knowledge that every little kid that finishes high school or finishes has bar mitzvah, they know these halachas. They're so not practical, but they are brought in Shulchan Aruch. There's numerous chapters of Shulchan Aruch are, deal with this, and especially with tefillin and regarding Shema. So it's repeated even. But I'm not seeing, just from skimming through, I have a Shulchan Aruch here, I'm not seeing a differentiation, at least here, with regard to tefillin.
I remember we used to ask Rav Azdaba What's the halacha, like the bare halacha? So he would say you have to go beyond the bare halacha, because according to halacha, you can sit in the toilet wearing I think he said tefillin shel rosh, and eating a piece of bread without a yarmulke. In other words, he's trying to show that's the halacha, but you should obviously go beyond the halacha. So in other words, I think the tefillin shel rosh was okay, and the tefillin shel yad was not okay.
I have a question.
My son is saying the opposite, the other way around. The tefillin shel yad was okay, and the tefillin shel rosh was not okay.
Well, I guess we'll have to see further. Maybe the Gemara will discuss it.
A quick question.
Maybe we'll see some.
Please.
Yes, Susan.
Okay, if someone is unable to put their tefillin on because they're bedridden, but they want to say their prayers.
Yeah.
Is another person allowed to wrap to help them put it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Ezra.
You said they're not practical, but I'll give you an example. Some people like to go camping. They go camping. There are no bathrooms in some of the places where they go camping. And so, or they go hiking, and or they go camping, whatever the case may be.
Right.
They get up in the morning, they're ready to daven, they're facing east. Next thing you know, something comes. Right. So you have a practical example right here of everything that we're talking about. And so, yeah, you would have to know what to do.
Right.
I mean, most of us would take them off and go and find a place where but sometimes you don't have the time to do that.
Right. Well, I agree with you. There is slight, there are, maybe certain scenarios where you get close to the dealing with some of these halachas, but I don't think it all, the actual, how you have to understand, in those days, they're walking around with tefillin on, but they're not carrying any bags.
Right.
Now, when you go camping, you've got a suitcase, you've got your backpack, you've got your this, whatever where in your campsite, you have your whole tent when you're camping, you have, you're not just holding a bottle of water, canteen around you, a container of water around you. You have a backpack with some kind bars, some Lara bars, and whatever. You have all these, you're well geared, and also who doesn't have an extra shirt on, an extra undershirt, and this you could put you could put them on your shirt, whatever. It's not like it's hard to find a scenario where it's exactly like in the olden days. You know what I mean? You wear a backpack when you go camping, so you can always stick them, and you don't have your tefillin on. Just think about it. You're walking around with tefillin on your head and on your arm. I mean, you're simply, and all you have is a robe that you're covered with in a belt. You really don't have anywhere to put your tefillin. So it really doesn't. It's rare to have a scenario where you would have these halachas. But you're right. You get close to them. You're in an airport and you don't really have. You're not taking any luggage with you, but you just have your tefillin. So you could have maybe, but it's definitely not exactly. We all have bags for our tefillin. In the olden days, they're wearing the tefillin. They're not even carrying the bag for the tefillin. So it's not. I don't see it's anywhere near the getting close to these type of scenarios. But okay, yeah, good point that it is possible in camping. Okay, so we're going to continue. Tana Rabbana, the rabbis learned. If a person wants to enter a meal that's a permanent meal, a person should walk and exercise before he enters a meal. How should he exercise? Either 10 times 4 amos, which means go back and forth 10 times, or daled pamim 4 times 10 amos. Go back and forth 4 times 10 amos. Whatever. Basically, walk 40 amos. walk 40 handbreadths, not handbreadths, cubits. Walk 40 cubits. Why should you do that? Because then you will get your digestive system working. V'yifna, you'll relieve yourself, and v'yacher kach nichnas, then you'll enter the meal. You won't have to like embarrass yourself to use the bathroom during the meal. So the Gemara is giving advice that if you don't want to have to excuse yourself during the meal, exercise a little before you enter the meal, and then it'll you should be all set. This will give you an urge to use the bathroom. Now the comment, one of the commentaries explains that the point is that it's not called bittul Torah. Even though you're exercising yourself, you're not really learning, but this is a legitimate excuse, reason to spend the time walking these 40 amos. Rabbi Yitzchak says, "Hanichnas l'suudas keva." If a person is entering a permanent official meal, I should just mention, Rashi adds one point that I didn't say, and that is that he walks 10 times these 4 amos, and each time he should try to feel if he has the urge after each time. So he doesn't have to do all the whole walk. Each time it should help him. So up to 10 times. Okay. So now it says a person who enters a meal, chayleitz tefillin, he removes his tefillin, and then he enters the meal. So upliga de Reb Chia, and this argues with Reb Chia. Dam Reb Chia manichan al shulchanai. Reb Chia says enter and just put them by the table. The previous opinion, Reb Yitzchak says, take them off before you enter. So Reb Yitzchak holds you should remove them earlier, and Reb Chia says, bring them right to the table, v'chein haderloi, and so is appropriate that they should be ready for him. You leave them outside, you got to wait till you finish everything, and here, bring them to the table so that you'll put them on right before you bench. Vad emas, until when should you leave them off? Amarav Nachman by Yitzchak Adzman Brach, until the time of benching. So again, we're seeing how they used to wear their tefillin continuously, and only when it came to a permanent meal, which means that they're eating more than a kabeya, they're eating more than the size of an egg, so then they would take off their tefillin. Tani Rechada, we learned in one place, in one brisa, Soirer Adam Tfilav Imma Isav. A person can tie their tefillin together with their money, Ba'afrak Susai, in their kerchief. V'tanya Idach, and we have another brisa that says, Loi Yotzur, that you shouldn't tie them in the same kerchief. So now Rashi tells us that doesn't mean you're actually tying them, putting money in the tefillin together in the same tie, but you're tying it to, it's the same kerchief, but you're tying it in 2 places. So the money is not actually on top of next to the tefillin. It's near it. It's in the same kerchief, but it's not exactly in the same pouch of it. It's not. So, but in one place it says you're allowed to, the other place it says you're not allowed to. So the Gemara answers like Kasha, it's no question. Hada azmene, hada lay azmene. One place is talking about where you prepared it. You had in mind that this is going to be used for tefillin, and you set it aside and reserved it. This is for tefillin. Once you do that, then it would be prohibited to use it for money. And this is an interesting halacha that basically something that's set aside to use for tefillin, you can't then use for something else, according to this opinion. And we'll see there's another opinion that says it needs both. You set it aside and you use it for it. You have to at least use it once. one opinion is you don't even have to use it once. Once you set it aside, it's a done deal. Rav Chisda says, Hi Sudra, the tefillin, the Azmane, Lametza Beit Tefillin. I'm sorry, this opinion holds you set it aside and you have to use it. You used it once for tefillin. Because Rav Chisda says that this kerchief that you're wrapping tefillin, that you set it aside, l'meitzer beit tefillin, tsar beit tefillin, once you use it for tefillin, asar l'meitzer beit pshita, you're not allowed to use it for any other item. And
Rabbi?
Yes.
Some people keep a mirror in the pouch of the tefillin.
What do they keep?
A mirror to see if the head tefillin is in center.
Oh, interesting. So it could be that when they make the tefillin boxes and they make the bag, they have in mind that you're going to be putting mirrors in it now. That's an interesting point.
I saw a few people use.
I'm not sure because they not only do they put the mirrors in the bag of the tefillin, I've seen the mirrors inside the container, that the box of the tefillin.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Seen that? Yeah, there's a lot of people nowadays, they do that. So the question is that I guess the manufacturer who makes the I guess in China, when they manufacture it, they probably manufacture it together. So I guess it's fine. I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question. Does it manufacture it together? And then does it matter if it's a guy manufacturing it? It might be a guy that's manufacturing.
Wait.
It doesn't matter his kavana.
You're making a joke, right?
Interesting question. Or maybe it matters when you buy it, or the person, the seller who sells
Maybe
it.
it depends on your own kavana.
Right. In other words, could be they leave it up to you.
Yeah.
They leave it up to you what you're going to want to put in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question. I guess this leads us to other questions. Okay, let me just read the Gemara. So we had one brisa said you're not allowed to put money in this container of the tefillin, and the other brisa says you could put money. And the answer was if you set it aside for tefillin or you didn't set it aside for tefillin. If you didn't set it aside for tefillin, you would be allowed to put money in the same kerchief that you're putting tefillin in. And as Rashi says, not together with the tefillin, but at least in the same kerchief that the tefillin is in, because you didn't set it aside solely for tefillin. And then it said, it brought from Rav Chisda. The Amar Rav Chisda, this sudra of tefillin that you set it aside for tefillin, if you tsarbei tefillin, if you put tefillin in it, asur l'meitzar beit pshiti, you would not be allowed to put other items in it. You would not be allowed to put other items in it. Divrei chulin, anything that's mundane. Azmene v'lei tzarbe. What happens if you set it aside? You planned on using it only for tefillin, but you didn't use it yet. Tzarbe. What happens if you used it v'lei azmene, but you didn't set it aside? Shari l'meitzar bezuzi. You are allowed to put coins in it. Ula Abaye, and according to Abaye, the Omar Hasmona Milsihi, according to Abaye, that says that that Hasmona, that when you prepare something, that is considered significant. So even though you didn't use it once, Abagav Deloitte Sarbe, even if you didn't use it, it's already considered significant. You would not be allowed to use it for coins. Sarbe, what happens if you used it for tefillin? but you didn't set it aside for only tefillin. So, if you set it aside, it would be prohibited. But if you didn't set it aside, it would not be prohibited. So what comes out from this is that Rav Chisda says that you need both. And if you, number one, set it aside solely for tefillin and you also use it, that would be prohibited to put coins in. Abaye says no, even if you just set it aside and that itself would be considered already prohibited to use for any mundane item. And that is the conclusion of this discussion of putting other items inside your tefillin bag, or inside the kerchief that's holding the tefillin. Okay.